Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Empty Cloud Buddhist Insights. Today is Monk Chat, and you have myself, Sanata Vihari Bhikkhu, and
Buddha, Samanera Buddha.
so we're going to be the two monks for today's Monk Chat. So feel free to, type your questions in, any questions you might have for monks about the monk's life, or we're prepared to be a monk, or stuff like that. I really feel that this is kind of like an opportunity and a platform to stick to what I remember is the motto of Buddhist insight. It's like connecting people in monastics, right?
With monastics.
Connecting people with monastics. So this is like definitely the place and the event during the week where you can actually connect, with monastics. So feel free to put in your questions in the chat. Oh, here's a follow-up question from yesterday. It's okay. Bhante, following the guidance and practice method through this morning, shifting my focus from bodily pain, it brought more joy to meditation, almost disregarding the pain. Oh, it continues over here. Usually I begin with metta for myself, then shift to focusing on the breath or body. However, reintroducing metta for all beings generated more. I think there's going to be more to this. There we go. Wholesome and radiant experience that also remained. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm happy that it worked out for you. Yeah, from yesterday's Sutta study.
Yeah.
I just told them, instead of just sitting with the pain all the time, if you find it too unbearable, after you've been working for a couple minutes with just being patient with it, then you can focus your mind on like thinking about the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. And that will the happiness that comes from that will help you deal with the pain.
Mm.
And then once you notice that your body is relaxed and your mind is calm, then you can come back again and sit with it again. And it was in reference to that he's saying that he was practicing it and introducing metta into the Satipatthana practice instead of doing it like a preliminary, and it went good for him. So I'm happy. Yeah. And
Sounds cool.
Let's see, we have a lot of hellos and Anjalis from like Anthony and Gita and Bhumika and Yankee and Karuna and Mary and Manal and Tori and Alex and Wasabi, Richard, Namo, all the usual suspects, right? All the same usual suspects that we have here. Oh, here we go. What's this? Hello, Venerables. I have a question about Uposatha. How should I handle the precept against beds? A mattress on the floor is sleeping on the couch, okay? What do you think?
Well, I think the precept is supposed to be protecting us from indulging in really luxurious, lofty beds. Like you go to a 5-star hotel and they have super nice silky sheets with a super soft, high mattress. So you feel like royalty laying on this bed. So if sleeping on the couch feels like a humbling experience for you, then I think that's exactly the spirit of the precept. If you want to sleep on the floor, you can sleep on the floor. Also, it could actually, some monastics will still sleep on a low, very simple bed, or like a slightly elevated wooden platform, maybe with also simple mattresses, or like different types of mattresses on the floor. So whatever feels like you're not sleeping in something that's lofty and you're going to indulge in it. The ideal place is somewhere when you wake up, you feel rested and you want to get up. So if you're sleeping somewhere where you wake up and it's super comfortable and you just want to stay in bed after you're rested, then it's probably best to downgrade a little bit. But don't torture yourself if you can't sleep.
Yeah, I think this is one that is very like relative due to context, because like during the time of the Buddha, they had certain types of beds, and now we have different types of beds, and what's considered maybe luxurious at that time now is considered like very humbling, standard. So it varies a lot, but the spirit is important, right? To avoid being trapped in by sensuality. So as long as you can kind of find wherever you're at with that, right? That you're not overindulging in in the sensual pleasure of just laying there, and that you can't get up and you don't want to get up and you're looking forward to laying down because it's so comfortable. That's really should be the meter for you. Thank you for that question. That's a very, practical question. Okay, I think we got Richard here again with a different question. Do karma merits or punya karma solely arise from consciousness, or can they also arise from external outcomes, like a slaughtered animals inadvertently generating good merits when its meat is consumed by Also, do you mean like you only living beings, right? Like sentient beings, when they're alive, can they only produce merit? Yeah, because it's based on the intention, right? So there needs to be that factor in the sentient being of chetana. If there's no chetana, then there can't be any punya karma. And if there's no chetana, you can't even get karma. So yeah, definitely, the ability to use that chetana has to be there. If that's not there, then there's no karma. I mean, that's the whole thing about Buddhism, right? Like when I say karma, I mean chetana. And if there's no chetana, then there's no karma.
Yeah, one of the things that comes to mind for this is some people will say, why donate my organs if I'm already dead? So the dana from the organs won't be any karma, right? So there's two parts to this, and it's related to what you're saying. So it is true that after you're dead, you don't get additional karma when they remove you. Like once they remove the organs from your body, it counts as dana, right? So that's true. So you have to be alive, like Bhante was just saying. If you don't have the intention there, then you don't get the karma. But of course, in the case of donating your organs, you have the intention of donating them while you're alive. So that intention is generating karma. But once it doesn't actually, if you had the intention of donating your organs and then you died and they cremated you, you would still get the same karma as long as you really meant to donate your organs. Because what they do afterwards is apart from your intention to donate them. So in this case, if the animal, whether they eat the animal's meat or not, it doesn't matter. The animal, it depends on whatever intentions it had before it died. Yeah.
That reminds me of what a lot of Sri Lankan families, they'll tell their children like, oh, when I pass away, please do this ceremony in my name for me. So I can cultivate punya karma, good karma. So they created the intention, beforehand. So they have that intention, and when they're dying, they have that intention also. So then, even though they're not the ones doing it, they're doing it. It's being done on their behalf, So you can also kind of see that play out in Buddhist culture, how there's this kind of idea of being able to follow through with these intentions and being able to go all the way through with the punya karma, even though the person is not alive anymore. Okay. Let's see which other ones we got over here. Just some good evenings.
Evening.
Okay, this is a question. Venerables, what importance should we be giving sleep in our Dhamma practice? Is there any insight which can be gained in the sleep state? From my reading of the suttas, I haven't seen anything like that. I mean, there's it goes the other way around. There's like benefits to practicing stuff in the wake state that the benefits will come in the sleep, like the benefits of practicing metta. Like you'll go to sleep fast, you won't have any nightmares, you'll wake up rested, you'll wake up on time. So it goes the other way around, but I haven't seen any. I mean, that's kind of a topic that's really absent in early Buddhism, is about sleep. You see it later developed in later Buddhist traditions, but I mean, in the suttas, does anything come to mind?
No, the only thing that comes to mind is a little bit reversed. It's a little bit, most people wouldn't know this because it's in the Vinaya, but in the Vinaya, if you do something while you're sleeping, actually the Buddha says that there is intention there, but it's negligible. It doesn't matter. So it's not a Vinaya offense. So there's kind of this sense that the sleep is less important. Like the intention in the sleep is less important than when you're waking. So there is a little bit of the reverse. But no, the Buddha doesn't talk about practicing while you're sleeping. There's also sometimes there's the discussion of 4 hours. I don't know if you've heard this, where they some traditions will say you should only sleep 4 hours because of how in the suttas they talk about the watches of the night. So the first watch of the night, the second watch of the night, and the third watch of the night. And the suttas it says the first watch of the night you should practice meditation, sitting and walking. The second watch of the night you should lay down and rest. And then already when you're resting, have this perception in the mind of getting up. So be ready to get up. And then in the third watch of the night, before the sun rises, you practice more meditation. So some people take this to mean you should only sleep 4 hours. But I think that realistically, that's not enough sleep for people. And I don't think the Buddha was counting the math on the monks sleeping. I think it's just we shouldn't indulge in sleep. We should make sure that we're making the most of our waking minds. So yeah, that's my understanding as well, that there was emphasis on being awake.
Yeah, it's tricky, because I remember like how they would measure time in Japan, and the hours were not as set as we have them today. The hours would get longer and shorter depending on the times of the year. So 1/4 of a night could actually be like 5 or 6 hours now. And then in the winter, and then in the summer, it could actually be 4 hours. So even that like quarter of a night is not a thing that would stay like that if they were using those kind of clocks that they were using in like East Asia, where the hours are always shifting in length.
Yeah.
So yeah, just do what's healthy. Everyone's body's different, We're not here to provide medical advice. So just do whatever works for your body best. Someone's like, I may have to give up my sleep number bed. Hey, if that works for you, everyone's body's different, So if you notice that regular beds you can't get any sleep and it's too painful, like don't bring any more dukkha than you need to in your life. There's already enough dukkha in our lives, so let's not add to it. Chad says, thank you. Oh, here's a multi-part question. How can we learn to be patient in mind speech when you or someone else doesn't understand things fast enough? My dad has this problem too, and I want to teach him patience. He likes Buddhism. We have the cat here.
Yeah, the cat's trying to eat the cables.
So I might want to also talk to him about this from a Buddhist perspective. What do you think?
Thank you, Bhante. Well, I think the first thing I would say about this is that we don't want to come to people with the attitude that I'm going to teach you how to be better. Like your behavior is wrong, and let me show you how my religion tells you that it's wrong, and let me teach you how to be better. Right? So that attitude usually will not help people, because they'll get a feeling, they'll be defensive, and there's kind of a sense that you're coming at them with wronging. And it's just the way that our mind works. In most people's mind, they're not going to respond well if you come up saying, okay, you're wrong, and I'm going to teach you how to correct your behavior, which is wrong. Especially if it's with a religion that they're not dedicated to. So you said that your dad likes Buddhism. I think that that's a good starting point. So he might be receptive, and he might be interested in what the Buddha has to say. But I wouldn't come at it like, hey, I know you like Buddhism, so let me tell you how to be better. Right? We don't want to come with that attitude. So more what I would suggest, and also I'm sure Bhante has good advice on this, what I would suggest is maybe say, sometimes I feel that there's a little bit of, it's sometimes hard to have interactions when there's too much frustration coming from both of us. And I've been working on, cat's got the camera. I've been working on being frustrated, and this has been working for me. I don't know if that's helpful. So maybe coming at it with a more direct, or asking if he'd like, noticing. So the specifics of it might be dependent on your situation, but preferably don't come at it with the answer already. But as for being patient, the cat is having some problems with this, more in body than with mind and speech.
Yeah, we're practicing patience right now too.
As for being patient, it's good to always have low bar, just slightly above what we can. You guys are probably used to this problem by now. It's been occurring for several months. We want to have a bar just slightly above where we're at. So if we're only a little bit patient, and we're like, okay, I'm never going to get angry again. Well, you will get angry again, unfortunately. It's not avoidable.
Okay, hello everyone. Sorry about that. We had some kitty issues.
Yep.
Yeah, Teddy strikes. They already know.
Yeah. We put some anti-chew spray. So apparently they don't like the smell of this. It helps safely deter a pet from chewing objects.
So I think we answered the last question already, right? I think you're
The only thing was the patience. How to deal with patience. Be more interested. If I don't know if it's fun to you. How to be more patient when someone isn't getting things.
Well, I mean, when it comes in patience is always about us wanting to get our way, right? It's always about me wanting things to be a certain way or at a certain pace that I want it to be, right? So we should kind of think about others. What pace would they like things to be, and move it from like our perspective to the perspective of others, right? And just keep practicing to do it at other people's speed. I mean, that's a big part of the monastic training. Like, we're not in charge of like the way things move around in the temple, like the senior monks or the abbot or someone else, your teacher is the one running the show. And I mean, it's over when they say it's over, and you might be there for a long time, and you just got to deal with it. And then sometimes people come and they'll stay in the temple all day, and you just got to stay there with them too. So like, and the more you practice that, the more you begin to understand that things are just going to happen the way they're going to happen. You really have no control over the situation, but you have control how you receive the situation, right? Like, your relationship to that situation is under your control. So we really kind of have to kind of make that pivot and think, instead of thinking, like, well, I want this conversation to happen in 5 minutes, or when I say a certain word, I want the person to answer within 10 seconds instead of waiting 30 seconds. I mean, that's all about like me, myself, and I wanting things to happen. And then the other person might be on the same boat too, right? They may want the conversation to be a certain way. So it's just working with that urge to want things to be a certain way, and just being okay with things however they turn out. I mean, that's the ultimate practice with everything in life, right? To notice that everything is always changing, everything is always transitory, and everything's happening according to various different causes and conditions, and many of which we have no control over. So why resist it? Why fight with something that you can't change? Trying to change something that you can't change is just a futile cause and just causes more pain. So for me, a lot of the time, I just learn to go with the flow, but I'm a California guy, so we kind of have that surfer kind of attitude. So I don't know if that works for everyone all over the world, to have that kind of more laid back, kind of chill attitude about things. Okay, Chris says, no mind. Richard, thanks for your thoughts and clarification. Dear Venerables. Here's another question from Richard. How can one overcome unpleasant, unworldly Vedanas that arise from insights during meditation? Can you give us an example, just to make it more clear? And then we'll get back to you. Manal says, this clarifies some of the questions surrounding sleep. Thank you so much for this understanding.
But
yeah. Okay, let's see. What does this say? One more question. I'm following Venerable Analayo's guide meditation on the 4 Satipatthanas. I'm having trouble with the mind. As I understand, mindfulness of the mind is about making sure the mind is free from kilesas, but I'm not sure what main object is supposed to be. Is it just full body awareness? So I think you're talking about Chitta Nupassana, right? Chitta Nupassana? Yeah, so when we apply Sati to Chitta Nupassana, then we're also applying Dhamma Vichaya, which is seeing if the states in the mind, like you said, if there's kilesas or no kilesas, right? If the hindrance are present, mostly are kind of like the 7 factors of awakening, although they're kind of usually placed in Dhammanupassana. But Chitta really has to do with, like my teacher would say, like emotion, or kind of like temperament, or feelings, or states of mind also. So really, I mean, all the 4 Satipatthanas It's just really seeing, if there's a skillful state arising or unskillful state arising. We can make it that simple. And when there's an unskillful state arising, you're aware of it, right? You try not to be taken in by it, which means getting pulled towards, if it's like a thought, a state of greediness or sensuality, you try not to get pulled into it. And if it's a state of aversion, you also try not to get pulled into it and lead you to hate and cruelty. So it's really kind of, again, practicing patience and tolerance and equanimity when these things arise. So you learn not to react, because the usual response is reactivity. Some bodily unpleasant sensation, reactivity. Some like feeling tone, unpleasant sensation, reactivity. Some mind unpleasant sensation, reactivity. Some Dhamma appearing, also reactivity. We're always reacting. And here we're learning to kind of just stay back and see that these things don't have to run our lives, and we don't have to react to them all the time. So that's like one insight that we get from practicing, that these things are not as powerful and not as immediately. We don't have to act upon them so immediately. So when we focus on the mind, you can specifically like focus on or be aware of your intentions. Your intentions. What are your intentions there? And see if those intentions are skillful or unskillful. But I mean, always, I think in every book that I've read from the many of Bhante Analayo, he always kind of very well defines which each one is, So I'm sure if you look in the book, he'll tell you exactly what he means, according to him, by like the Chidanupasana and how to practice it. But yeah, mind means chitta. So it's focusing more on that element of the mind instead of dhammas, which is the next one, So just in general, anytime you're practicing satipatthana, you're abandoning the unskillful and you're trying to become aware of anything that leads to hindrances and cultivating the skillful, which means like developing the 7 factors of awakening. And that's kind of like the general path. I don't know if anyone had anything else to say.
Yeah, maybe I would just add that for this, one of the things you mentioned is the mind's supposed to be full body awareness. So maybe if you're in formal meditation and you're getting to this stage in Satipatthana, usually, if I remember correctly, the way Bhante Anadio is teaching Satipatthana is with meditation is a more general progression. So there's different ways of practicing Satipatthana, but if you're doing this in the more the progressive way, where you build the mindfulness of the body, and then you start to experience certain types of feelings in meditation, you start developing those, you go to the mind and then the dhammas. If it's more meditative, then in informal meditation, then you can also, if you're not really sure if your mindfulness is not strong and grounded, you might not want to go to that stage yet. It might be too subtle, because by the time you're doing Chittanupassana and Satipatthana, if it's this more meditative, gradual samadhi practice, then usually by that point you're starting to expand the mind, gather and collect the mind, settle it into unification. So you're kind of playing with the texture of the mind into samadhi. So if it's in the context of samadhi, then I might go back. If you're still looking for things and you're still trying to focus on the body, you might want to go back and ground your mindfulness a little bit stronger, and then start eventually, as you start to gain more samadhi, more unification and stillness and calm, then maybe start kind of playing with the mind itself. But yeah, it depends on the context, and I would look at Bhante Analayo's books.
Yeah, because he's very particular about the way he wants you to practice, Let's see. Yes, Karuna, I did cut off for everyone. It was a kitty.
Yeah.
Alex says yes, thank you. Lisa says yes. Yeah, they know about the cat here too. Jogi. Short monk chat tonight. People are laughing. Teddy again. Yep, hopefully he'll be back soon. Okay, I think. Let's see. Teddy's showing us impermanence. Okay, here's Richard's follow-up when we asked him about what he meant. I meant insights from meditation. For example, I'll never become enlightened in this lifetime. Also unpleasant. I mean, that's more of a opinion, right? Than an insight. Yeah. So I wouldn't consider that an insight. That comes out of meditation. That's like an interpretation of what's been happening so far in your meditation experience. So it might feel like that. It might feel very real, but you should question that feeling. Where's this feeling coming from? Is it based in reality, or is it kind of just based on a feeling of hopelessness? And is that hopelessness a reality? If you have surrounded by kalyanamitas and you have the Dhamma and you have all these wholesome qualities, I mean, you're closer to awakening than you think, right? And if you weren't to have all these things, if you were in a place where you didn't have any friends and you didn't have a community and you didn't have a practice, I mean, in that kind of very deprived state, perhaps you could feel hopeless, but you're here, you're constant, and I'm sure you're studying and you're practicing. So, just maybe try to recontextualize your practice, and focus on all the things that you have right now, because that doesn't really seem like an insight to me.
Unpleasant Vedana for renunciation.
Also, unpleasant Vedana from renunciation.
Maybe not have any sensual pleasures.
Yeah, so like an unpleasant feeling that arises from the practice of nekamma, like letting go. I mean, because I'm trying to connect it with the on how that would apply for like unworldly. I don't know if it's still talking about the unworldly from earlier or not. But yeah, I mean, from renunciation, from letting go, especially for monks, we might not get the food that we want. We let go of that, and the food might not be warm, or something that's supposed to be cold might be warm. Something that's warm might be cold, right? You see someone bring you ice cream, but it's all like melted already, and you might not get food, or so there's a lot of things from when we let go of things, or if you're following the 8 precepts, there might be some unpleasant Vedanas that arise because of all the things that you left behind, all the comforts. But you just treat it like any other unpleasant Vedana. That's all there is. It's an unpleasant Vedana at the end of the day, whether it's worldly or unworldly, or from 5 precepts, 8 precepts, 10 or 227 or more. I mean, it's just a unpleasant Vedana. So you already have experience dealing with them, and just kind of apply the same thing that you've been doing. I mean, I don't think I have anything else to say about that. Kim says hi from Maine. Anthony, let's see, what is this? In the Chula Sunyata Sutta, the signless samadhi is described as only perceiving what is at the 6 sense doors. It's practicing the signless meditation, simply situating sense restraint at the 6 senses. I think he's talking about the animita, right? Animita samadhi. Yeah, and if it's I wouldn't put it that way, because it sounds like at the end it sounds like indriya samvara, right? So when sati is at the eyes and you're guarding the senses from the unwholesome things exciting the mind or perturbing the mind, that's indriya samvara. That's the practice of indriya samvara. So animita samadhi wouldn't just be that, because that would come under the bhavana part. So first is like samvara, pahana, bhavana, anurakana. So just guarding the senses, having sati there, that is indriya samvara, and it's not animita samadhi.
Yeah, one thing I'd say about this is that the passage that you're referring to is, because I know what you're talking about, it's actually it's not found in the parallels. So this is one thing that if you want to read about, Bhante Nalio has also written on. And if you look at the sutta, actually, it looks a little bit out of place, right? So it says that in the animita samadhi, the only disturbance left is the disturbance of these 6 senses in the life force, basically being alive. But then it says it again after someone's attained arahantship. So it says they destroyed the taints, and the only disturbance left is the 6 senses. Right, so that actually makes a lot more sense. An arahant still has the dukkha of just worldly, the sankharas of the senses are dukkha, in the sense that there's no actual, they die, they pass away, they're impermanent. So there's that sense of dukkha to them. And that makes a lot more sense. And in the parallels, it doesn't say that for animita samadhi, which actually has 2 different passages that look like they've been smashed together. So I wouldn't read too much into that personally. I don't think it's, my opinion and Bhante Nadio's opinion, I don't think it's authentic to the text. It looks like it's just an accident. The reciters accidentally repeated the passage. the passage there.
Okay. Let's see, we have, how can we evaluate the state of the Dhamma practicing in a healthy and honest way? Instead of thinking about my own practice, I often think about the faulty views of other people despite not wanting to evaluate the state of the Dhamma practice in a healthy and honest way. Instead of thinking about my own practice. Well, here I think is, usually when we focus on the practice of the Brahma Viharas, is very outwardly driven. And we forget that we're one of those beings in the world, in this place, however we practice it, right? So, anytime I see a little bit like self-criticism, I think it's time to do some inner Brahma Vihara practice towards oneself, and include yourself in those practices, instead of like criticizing your Dharma practice or, thinking about, like you said, faulty views of other people despite not wanting to, or thinking about others. So I think we have to have a strong basis in the Brahma Viharas, because when I look at the path, I see the second step is the Samasankappa. And right there we have like Nekama, Avyapada, and Abhihimsa, which is like letting go, renunciation. We also have Avyapada, which is like the cultivation of metta, loving kindness, and Abhihimsa, which is like karuna. So we need to be actively developing these steps to support us in the further path. And also by practicing sila, we're also developing a mind, a compassionate mind, a mind of loving kindness. So if we look at these, like the second step, third step, fourth step, fifth step, we see like a big focus on compassion and loving kindness for others. And also, as earlier, we're talking about the practice of patience and tolerance and equanimity. All those factors are helping us. And sometimes I notice that, for modern practitioners, there's so much focus on the development of sati and insight, and we kind of get a little bit unbalanced. And before I was a monk, when I would just be on the bus or I was going anywhere, I'd go to the store, even at the gym, like doing reps, I was constantly practicing metta all the time, because it was like metta was hard for me, not because I was like an aversion type or I had anger, but it was just hard to grasp. It felt so ephemeral for me. So I knew I needed to work on that. And that changed my relationships with everyone around me, like with my family, with my friends. Everyone noticed how just I started treating people differently. And I started treating them differently first in my head before it actually ever happened on the outside. So we can see like an inner transformation first before we see an outer one. And usually other people will notice it. So all of that is to say, it's just maybe a little bit more focus on the practice of metta, and not just like in formal meditation, but in everyday life, in everything that we do, and try to see everything through a perspective of metta and compassion, and how we would want people to respond to us and treat us in a similar situation, give them that benefit of the doubt. And that's what I really found powerful in my practice, is once I started living a life that was based on loving kindness and compassion and altruistic joy, and trying to filter my whole life through those lenses, and instead of just being the way I was, or just limiting metta to like a formal meditation, which I would do like every other day on the cushion or something. It wasn't enough. So that's the way I would deal with that kind of problem if it was happening to me. Any ideas?
No, I think that's pretty good. It covers most of the bases. Maybe I would just say briefly, just looking, when they covered this, but just looking also at if we're judging others, and we say, oh, like look at all the, sometimes it just comes up, like you said, you don't want to, and then as you do this metta practice that Bhante is recommending all the time, it'll change your attitude. But maybe it comes up every now and then, and you can actually look without being too critical. But it might be a little bit of a helpful technique just for a little bit. When you're judging others, you see, wow, it's unwholesome that I'm judging people. So you look at other people's bad faults, but then you realize that judging is bad. And you might feel a little disgusted. So sometimes the Buddha talks about this feeling of hiri-ottappa, a sense of conscience in our own self when something arises that is not right. So we don't want to be judgmental. Don't try to force yourself to feel guilty. And I would definitely emphasize the metta, but it might help if you balance that a little bit by feeling a sense that it's wrong to judge other people. Your mind will go towards it less, because when it feels that something's wrong, it doesn't want to go there. It doesn't want to do something wrong.
Yeah, that reminds me, like, I think we covered the first two steps in the Vitakka Santana Sutta now, where it says, like, change the unwholesome sign to a wholesome one, right? So instead of having that aversive, I gave the example, like practicing metta. And then the next one says, consider the consequences, which is like what you said, right? So yeah, and that's what I talked about last night. So you could just watch it again and you'll get all the steps. We just covered 2, but you'll get the other 3 steps in the Vitakka Santana Sutta Majjhima Nikaya number 20. Oh, this is Proto Dhamma. This is our my friend from earlier.
Oh,
yeah, the one who sent us the treat.
Sadhu.
He says, Vandana Bhante, what is the connection between the dukkha of not getting what you want and the sama sankappa of nekama? He knows what I have to say about all of this. What do you think?
That's it. Let's see. The dukkha of not getting what you want and the sama sankappa of nekama. Well, actually, this kind of relates to what Richard was asking about the sometimes unpleasant feeling, like we let something go and then it doesn't feel good at first. What I would say about this, though, is that there's the intention of letting something go and actually letting it go are a little bit different. If we actually let it go, then we won't feel any unpleasant feeling. So that's how you can know. Actually, this is a way of testing. You might think, oh, I let that go. But then you start missing it a little bit. That means that you intended to let it go. So you're working on it. And that's great. We want to work with bhavana, where we're cultivating that intention. But once you've actually let something go, you won't want it anymore, because that you walked away from it. So it's kind of like actually maybe an abusive relationship or a bad relationship, right? Some people, once they walk away from the relationship and they really let it go, then they don't want to go back. But there's another stage where people are kind of walking away. They're trying to let go of it. They might separate, but they still feel that they want to go back to that dukkha, right? So there's that difference between trying to separate, but then actually walking away. I mean, I'm better off. And then it's a worldly simile, so don't take it all the way, right? But that's an example. So the dukkha of not getting what you want might arise. Maybe you want something, but you're intending to relinquish it. So you really want cold coffee, iced coffee.
Yeah.
But,
that we didn't have that problem today.
Yeah.
Thanks to Proto Dharma.
Proto Dharma said coffee. You really want coffee, but you're relinquishing it because you think, oh, I have a problem with this. I want to let go of it. So there's that. But the other thing is, once you realize the joy of letting go, so the joy that arises of, oh, I don't need it anymore. I feel so good. I feel so light. I don't need coffee anymore. I don't need that sensual activity. That's the dukkha of I'm sorry. It's the sukha of nekama, rather than the dukkha of not getting what you want. So that's a couple of thoughts on that.
There's a little follow up here. How does the nekama help and bring relief when not getting what you want or losing what you had? One thing that I've given a lot of Dhamma talks about nekama, because I'm usually talking to lay people, and lay people think nekama is mostly like for monastics, right? And I tell them, no, when you practice dana, like today, I told the people, you're practicing nekama because you're giving up time, you're giving up effort, you're giving up money, and that brings happiness. So then I used to use this other example that's kind of like that. So if you really practice nekama and you really had the Brahma Viharas, let's suppose you're really in love with someone, right? In love with someone, you're probably married or in a long-term relationship, and that person comes up to you and they say, you know what, I found someone else and I really love them and they've made me happier and I'm happier than I've ever been. If you really develop nekama and you really had loving kindness, you'd be like, oh, I'm so glad for you, right? Like, I want you to be happy. Their happiness is more important, right? You wouldn't want them to stay with you and be miserable because you really have that connection with them. So, I mean, that's an extreme example, but I think that even in situations that are difficult, if we make a pivot and we take a different perspective and we take it from the other person's lens, we can be like, well, they're happy, and let's focus on them being happy instead of my pain, right? Because once we start thinking about ourselves, Here goes the cat again.
Maybe
Once we start thinking about ourselves, that's when all the problems come, right? But once we start thinking about others, then there's no problem. The problems always come because my aversion, like my greed, my attachment, my hatred. But the more we focus on others, helps. But if it's something that's too difficult, best not to think about that person. Keep your mind away from it. Keep your mind away from it, and don't let it go. But just you can still wish them well. Whatever that person is doing, may they be well, happy, comfortable, and peaceful. I don't want to know, because sometimes if they're doing too good, we might feel a little resentment, right? And it might sting more. But I don't need to know, but may they be well, may they be happy, and things like that. But the pleasure of nekama is the pleasure of, I call it relief, letting go. So imagine you're carrying this burden, like all these thoughts and emotions that you have towards that person or that thing or that experience that you can't let go of. And then once you let go of that attachment you have to it, you just feel this great sukha, this great pleasure of like dropping that heavy burden that you were carrying all the time. And in one of the suttas, right, it says, the Buddha says, imagine there was a young boy who sees a girl that he really likes, right? And then he sees that girl talking to a young man, like how would he feel? He'd feel all bothered, he wouldn't like it. And then like suppose some time passes now, and he's over her and he sees that same girl like talking to another man, how would he feel? He wouldn't care anymore, So kind of we have to take like that kind of a perspective. Like maybe right now it's a little bit too strong, but know that in the future you'll be free from that burden, right? Kind of like kids, like they know when they're 18 they're going to get their driver's license and move out and things like that, but right now they're supposed suffering of being stuck at home and being limited is real. Like they don't like it, they get upset with their parents, they fight, I hate you mom, I hate you dad, you don't let me do what I want. Their pain is real. But they know, like, haha, like after some time, I'll be the one calling the shots, So whatever painful situation we're in from loss, we can think like, well, this situation is not permanent. And then sometime in the future, it's going to be different. And then rejoice in that capacity. I mean, that's the beauty I always found about it, anicca, impermanence. To people it's sad, but to me it was liberating. Like whatever's going on now, whatever pain, whatever sorrow, whatever horrific thing, like it's not going to last. So I feel good. Because the worst thing is when you feel like it's going to be forever. And that's what leads people to do, like, make drastic decisions. Like, I have no other choice because this is going to stay this way forever. But once you change it and you're like, well, it's not going to stay this way forever, it gives you options, right? You see like a light at the end of the tunnel possibly. But if you turn off that light, people get completely desperate and they'll do radical things. I hope we provided some useful information. Richard just makes a comment about what he said. Yes, correct. Not insights, wrong word choice. I really meant observations. It was a bit challenging to explain, but that was the gist. Thank you so much. This is an interesting question because of our Vinaya discussion. Yeah, I haven't seen any emphasis on this in the suttas. Like virginity is like not a thing, like being celibate is, but that's very different than virginity.
Yeah, maybe you could clarify shadow of label.
Yeah, but I will say this, that I've noticed that certain people in certain Buddhist cultures have more of an affinity for monks who have been monks since kids because they've never had any sexual relations. So they're like, oh, these are like really pure monks, because like they've never even experienced it at all. So I have seen some kind of like emphasis on that, but it's not based like on what the Buddha said. It's like culture, and culture is always changing. So I think, from my understanding, that really has to do with like culture and like wanting to, in some way, form society a certain way, right? And prevent. I think, as many of us want to do, prevent young people from getting pregnant early, because all the studies show that just makes life more difficult for them. So there's these kind of things that have been going on in society to kind of prevent young people from having children before they're ready and then being abused by older people and things like that. So I think virginity really comes from that kind of place, and then later it becomes like fetishized in spirituality and other circles. But that's just from, what I think about this whole situation, because I haven't seen any emphasis in the suttas about virginity. Here's another question. Is it normal for unpleasant sensations to consistently arise with deepening samadhi? Like if increased stillness and lessened need for direct thought, it seems to come with forceful, jerky, shaky breathing. That's interesting. In my experience, the closer I get to samadhi, the less unpleasant sensations or unwholesome states or anything. I mean, if I'm getting closer, deepening in samadhi, there's less. I feel like in my everyday life, there's more. But as I sit on the cushion and I practice, they begin gradually reducing. So I don't have any firsthand knowledge about something like this happening to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's sometimes it's also hard to know. It can be a personal thing. So, for instance, let's say someone has a physical problem. Like as they sit longer, their body starts aching. But it just so happens that corresponds with their deepening. They start feeling more joy from the meditation. So then they might think, well, my unpleasant sensation is increasing with my meditation, but it's because of a physical kind of correspondence. So it's hard to know, like, why is the breath? I would wonder, why is the breath becoming forceful or jerky? So they could be, is it physiological? But I would also agree with Bante. It's a little bit strange for unpleasant sensation to increase if it's not just a side effect of something else. It might, if it feels forceful and shaky, I would say that's probably, you're probably forcing it, right? It's probably feels like that because the breath is a little bit tight. And so there might be a little bit of an increase coming up of pleasant sensation in the mind from other things, but you're not really at that stage yet where the mind is relinquishing some of the force. Because as you go into samadhi, you should be, your body, the experience of the physical body, the experience of your awareness, of your kind of physical awareness, it should be, the Buddha says, it gets relaxed, it becomes calm and pleasant and easeful. And by the fourth jhana, sometimes it'll even say there's no breath. So there's no perception of the breath, right? So the breath, if by the fourth jhana it's cut off, then any kind of breath, any kind of movement and any of that going on in the body should be getting more and more soft, more and more gradual up to that point. So if your breath is feeling forceful, I'd say it might just be a temporary kind of, you're between states, like you're kind of getting somewhere, but you haven't relinquished some things. So I would just keep focusing on the relaxing or see if it's physiological, but it shouldn't be, it's not, I wouldn't say it's normal. No, not in my experience or in the.
So another thing that might be useful is just changing posture. Like just change the way you sit, or even sit on a chair or lay down, or, just try putting the body in a different position. Maybe that position, no matter how much you like it, might not be the right position for you. So just kind of work with your body too.
And one thing, actually, just to clarify, I would say it's not normal for samadhi to deepen and that to happen, but it's really normal to feel those types of things in meditation.
Oh yeah.
So just so.
Yeah, and stranger things too.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that's a question or a statement.
Okay. It is the perception of neither perception nor not perception that is not considered against the parallels.
Oh yeah, he's going back to the thing you said.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd have to. Yes, I know what you're talking about. I'd have to double check to give you a good answer to go back to the question. My understanding was that from the signless concentration, there's still the asavas. So there's still the defilements that are there. And so one recognizes that, actually, I'm remembering now, what the sutta says is that the signless concentration, they realize that too is constructed by choices and intentions. And they realize, so what they're realizing is basically the mind is not freed from creating states of consciousness and states of existence, which correspond to that. So, so I would say that, again, the senses, the dukkha of the six senses, it comes with someone who's awakened. Those senses are still there until they pass away. But again, I wouldn't equate anivita samadhi to to awareness of all six senses. Because if you're aware of the objects of the six senses, then you're aware of nimittas, you're aware of features and signs. So it'd be kind of the contradiction to the definition of this the state.
Okay. Proto Dhamma just says, thank you, both venerables. That's valued advice for your wisdom. Oh, Anthony gives us some more information. I'm skipping the perception because it's not found in the parallels and it's too subtle for perception to be used for emptiness practice, I guess. I was just wondering how y'all see Animitta Samadhi, as I don't know how to go about practicing it and interesting in exploring it. Yeah, maybe that's a topic, for like a future episode that we do, because we're always having things going on. Maybe something. I remember Bhante Sudaso doing one some time ago. So there's like so many videos, I lost count, like on Buddhist insights. So if you go in there and maybe search for like Animitta Samadhi, like I've heard Bhante Sudaso talk about it a couple times.
Yeah, if you look up also silent illumination, sometimes he calls it that. That's the name in Chinese for a similar practice. So yeah, I would look up talks on that by Bhante Sudaso. And there's some other, you can also find other talks on silent illumination that aren't even from Theravada monastics, but the practice of Animitta Samadhi is pretty common in Zen and Chan.
Yeah, that's what I was doing for the last couple months. The Shikantaza Zazen, just open, choiceless awareness.
Yeah, one thing I might say about this though, Anthony, too, is that if you're looking to exploring Animitta Samadhi, if you look at the Chula Sunyata Sutta, it's the last step, coming after also formless perceptions. And I know that Bhante Nadio says that you might not necessarily need to be in a formless samadhi state, but what I would say is that if you want to reach Animitta Samadhi, you don't need to don't rush too quickly, because basically the Buddha is putting it as the last step of a very developed meditation practice. So I would just focus on the other ones, and it should become clear to you, because it's the exact same pattern in that sutta, right? You realize the perception that's there, the features that are there that you can let go, you let them go to a more refined one. So I would keep practicing like that and figure out for yourself, also with the talks, how Animitta Samadhi, the natural evolution of it.
Yeah, from the Dzogchen practitioners that I've heard, like that kind of objectless meditation also comes like way near the end. Like they don't start off with that. They actually start off with like the traditional training, which is like thousands of prostrations, and like a lot of guru worship. And then like after many years, you get into like, the Animitta practice, So I think we always have to remember the teachings and their context. It's very important. We were talking about earlier how here in the West, we always like to like bypass and skipping, take the express lane and go to like the real practice, right? Like the deep practice. But the Buddha taught a gradual path for a reason, especially when you read like the Digha Nikaya, it's all gradual path, like for every single sutta almost, especially like the first section is definitely that. So let's remember that, and I know some things are very exciting. Like I'm also interested in like, ooh, wow, these crazy states, like how is it going to be and stuff like that. But like, let's focus on our foundational practices. I used to do martial arts and, just work on your jab and your cross all the time and sprawling, like, like the basics all the time. Because those fancy things are like, they're cool to do. But when it actually comes to applying like something in real life, like the basics are the things that are going to save you and help you. So let's bring it back to the foundations, right? 4 foundations of mindfulness, bringing it back to the Brahma Viharas and Sila and Dana and studying and having good friends. And Kat, yes, he's agreeing. And then at the end of the road, we're going to end up there anyways, You'll end up at that position where you're going to experience these higher trainings anyway. So we don't have to try to rush. It's all going to unfold naturally. Oh, no more questions. What time does this end? I don't know.
9 usually.
Oh, we got 30 more minutes.
Yeah, if there's any more questions. Also, Anthony, actually, the Mahasunyata Sutta, after this, it talks just about what Bhante was saying about the gradual training for emptiness. The Buddha says, you might want to read that one. It's a good one. It's right after it says that, I'm sure you've read it, but that basically if you can't do Animitta Samadhi, go back. And it talks about practicing, being restrained in your speech, developing seclusion, developing the jhanas, all the basic steps, exactly what Bhante is saying. So I would focus. That's a good sutta, and it kind of discusses a little bit more about the development of that practice in terms of the standard training that Bhante is mentioning here. So that's another one that you could look into. I think Teddy is upset that he can't shoot the cables.
I think he also might be hungry. Okay, any questions?
Maybe if there's nothing in a couple minutes.
Yeah, we'll give it a few more minutes. We got like 19, 20 people watching.
Yeah.
No questions about how to deal with like hot, humid weather? Let's see. Oh, here's one. I have a simple question. Do you read the suttas in a particular calendar order, like each week or a day, or has a special reading? When I was initially going through them, I mean, I was reading a couple suttas every day. You know, I went through the Digha Nikaya and I did it like 3 times or 4 complete. Then I did the same thing with the Majjhima. Then I went through the Samyutta. Then I went to the Anguttara, and I just kept going like that. And nowadays, it's just like, you know, I have some curiosity in my mind that day, and I'll just go look for like that particular sutta. I'm like, oh, I remember this. Let me go there again, and that way. But I don't really have like a methodical practice right now. The way I go through it. But I mean, I'm always chanting the suttas. That's one thing I do almost every day for sure. Like, you know, like Karaniya Metta Sutta, Ratana Sutta, Mahamangala Sutta, Dasadhamma Sutta, like all these suttas, I go through them. And so one way that you can go about it is doing it like I learned in the Sri Lankan tradition, where you start with those first 3 suttas, and it's called the Maha Parita Pirith chanting. And there's like a kind of order, and then during the Vasa, the Sri Lankan monks like will chant in that order during the night, or they'll actually go through the entire like all the Sutta Pitaka, you know, and chant all the suttas within like a 3-month period. But they just kind of go like however you open up the book, you know, there's like that order that you find in the long discourses, the way they're arranged there. But yeah, there isn't like a every other day. I mean, I would just say whatever free time you have, just read every day. And it's easier if you go to like the Samyutta Nikaya because they're shorter. So like you can dedicate a few minutes every day to studying, and then take a couple of days off too, because you don't want to get into where you start having an aversion to reading them because you're just reading them so much, you know, you're like oversaturated. So make sure that like there's some curiosity and excitement about going into the suttas. And if you're going through them and you notice that that's lacking, maybe you need to pull back a little bit and get a little bit more rest and find that enthusiasm, right? And that energy, and then just go back in. But I think for everyone's a little bit different. I don't know. How did you go through the suttas, or how are you going through them?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I was actually thinking, this isn't directly how I did it, but I have an email thing called readingfaithfully.org, where if you sign up on the email list, they send you a sutta every day. It's a monk who runs it. So I'll sometimes do that. When I went through when I go through the suttas, I mostly went by a mixture of reading of theme and then just reading through. So I didn't go in actually in a particular order until later. Maybe I was like, oh, I want to read all the suttas in this of the Digha Nikaya. But at first it was kind of more just, oh, I want to learn about this, and I'll read through the whole thing, and then I'll be like, oh, there's this thing, I'll read through this. So it was kind of just random based off of, oh, this caught my eye, or I want to know about this. Or you'd find a topic and then you'd be like, oh, this topic comes up here and here and here and here. And next thing you know, you've read a bunch of suttas all about one topic, or the suttas next to it. So it's kind of just what inspires you. Or you can do it in a more systematic way, like Bante saying, going from A to Z. But also the readingfaithfully.org. That's a really good email because it just sends you one short sutta a day, and it also is by every month has a topic. So I think this month it's sense pleasures. So it talks about sense pleasures, and every day it'll just send you a short sutta, or maybe it'll be metta. It'll send you a short sutta on how to develop metta, or the things like that. So it's just a quick reading. You get it in your email. And it could be also an introduction. So maybe you don't want to read all the suttas. It's going to take you a while. But you start to get an idea, oh, this is what the suttas are like, and it's a little bit thematic, so you get something that's catered to being applicable to everyday life for monks and lay people. So that's a good website that is by calendar, but it's just selected according to the people who make the email.
Now I'm remembering when I first started coming into the Dhamma, what I was doing, and this is when second time I went to Afghanistan, I made a determination that every day I was going to study one verse of the Dhammapada. So every day I would read a Dhammapada verse, and then I would also find, like, luckily enough, that's the same time that Bhante Yutta Dhammo was doing the series back then. So I was following along with him too, but then he stopped, but I continued, So that was like one thing. So it doesn't have to be like, something so big, like I was just taking like a line or two lines from each Dhammapada verse and coming to it every day and studying with it, So that's why I also recommended the Samyutta Nikaya. Because, if you start off with the Digha Nikaya or Majjhima Nikaya, it can be a little like too much, like too much reading. It could be like you're actually studying for a class. But if you take these shorter suttas or these like something from like the Sutta Nipata or the Udana, like, I think it's a little bit more accessible in the sense that things don't repeat themselves so much. And that's one of the things a lot of people complain about when they're studying the suttas. They're like, Bhante, I read 2 pages and like only one word changed in each line. And it keeps repeating itself and it's boring. It's so hard to read. But those shorter suttas, like, they're not as repetitive. So they're a little bit easy if that's what's going on with you. I select the Torah and Gospels where each is focused on a particular calendar date. Got it. Maybe Bhante Sujata will do something like that, because I remember his inspiration for like doing Sutta Central was like that all the other religions have like free versions on the internet and things like that. So maybe, like you said, for every day. I do know that there's a calendar for the Dhammapada one. There's like 2 books. One, I think it's like a Dalai Lama one, and somewhere else. And for every day of the year, they have like a Dhammapada verse or something like that. Yeah, I've seen it at a couple of bookstores. So there's like 2 different versions of it if you want to do that.
Yeah, I think Buddhism is a little bit too disorganized in comparison to Christianity to have an official calendar. We're a little bit too messy.
Okay, Karuna. Do you think it's better to memorize a lot of Pali noun declensions first, or to build vocabulary, noun and verbs, so we can easily recognize them? What do you think?
I think you should do vocabulary if you're learning Pali, because also you'll learn the declensions with exposure. If you just memorize a bunch of declensions, it's going to be a little bit, I would say it's probably going to be a lot of information. It's going to be abstract, and it's not going to be applicable because all you know is the endings, but you don't know the words. But if you know the vocabulary, you can read the sutta, say, get a gist of it. Okay, I recognize this word, this word. You sort of see, what's that ending? What's that ending? And you'll learn the endings in context. So the best way I would say is learn the endings. Try to learn the endings mostly in context with very minimal study. Don't make it too formal. But then you can study the vocab with just minimal vocab with minimal grammar, and then use the vocab and learn the grammar by reading the suttas. That's how I would do it. And that's usually the quickest. If you need a little bit more study with the declensions and the verb endings for you to be able to pick it up, if that's your learning style, then you can do more. But ideally, do as little possible studying formal grammar endings out of context, because you'll pick it up much quicker and much more fun if you read it with the vocab in the suttas.
Okay, any more questions?
Also, it's good to see you, Mary. Mary was here at the monastery today.
Oh, yeah. I still haven't figured out the last names. Oh, here we go. I think this is probably what initially was a true question. Why is celibacy and avoiding any sexuality at all important to spiritual? Well, it isn't in all spiritualities. I mean, a lot of forms of like esoteric tantric practices, really use sexuality as part of their practice. So I wouldn't say that's like a universal, and depending on context is too, like even in like Abrahamic traditions within like a married relationship, like it's, just go for it, as long as they're like procreating. I think that's always the thing. Like it needs to be towards procreation, serving something. So I think I wouldn't, say that celibacy and avoiding any sexuality is important to at all important to spirituality, like in a general kind of universal sense. But definitely you can see in many practices, especially like in Buddhist practices that are not tantric, a lot of focus on celibacy, but that is just a very particular dimension of sensual restraint, So it's not only sexual, but all sensual. So we practice to, restrain ourselves from being taken in from images, from sounds, from taste, from smells, from touch, from all these different things, So it's not limited to that. But sexuality also comes with a lot of social things that happen with sexuality, right? Unlike like you just eating a lot, indulging in sensuality through like smelling and eating and listening to music and watching beautiful things, sexuality has a lot of repercussions. It can lead to violence, to wars between tribes, and it can have huge repercussions. So I think because of the social implications that it has, it's always been, a very important part of the practice, right? I think we were just talking about it the other day. So imagine like, you go to a monastery and it turns up someone ends up pregnant, or something like that, like it would be a big thing, it would be a big thing, not because having sex is a bad thing or an evil thing, but when there's a certain community, they're trying to hold a certain standard and something to that level happens, it just makes a big impact on that community. I mean, and that's the whole argument for like, even for the lay people in Buddhism, when they follow the 5 precepts, the Kame Sumi Chachara Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami, the Buddha's trying to avoid social conflict. That's the whole point of it, because like young men would be sleeping around with other people's wives and partners, or people who are not allowed to, they're having relationships without permission of the people who are in charge of them. The main reason that I've seen in the suttas for that rule is to avoid social conflict, so we can see how sex probably comes with more social repercussions than like overeating or overindulging in watching entertainment or listening to sounds or smelling things or, perfuming your body. So I think it's just because of the consequences, the social consequences, that there's so much more emphasis on this celibacy and those parts of it. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really powerful part of it, is that sometimes we overlook that. Yeah, it's when sexual relationships is a relationship. I think the other thing with celibacy, and because it's also not just Buddhism, you see, like Bante was saying, some religions they emphasize procreation. So actually in Brahmanism, sometimes there's a duty that a man is supposed to have every time a wife is in her fertile period. They're supposed to have sex. So that's a spiritual practice that's requiring sex. But in Buddhism, also in Catholic monasticism, all over the world, you'll find spiritual practitioners, they practice celibacy. And I think that it's also because usually sexuality is one of the most innate urges that humans and animals have, because we have this desire to procreate and to have sex. And so it's one of the things that motivates a lot of people. So the main reason for men disrobing in Buddhism is because they want to have a relationship, which usually almost always a sexual relationship, right? So it's not just the sex, but it's, again, that social sexual relationship. And so it's kind of the main distraction from living a contemplative life for a lot of people, because maybe you have to eat. So really it's a practice of restraint, but you don't have to have sex. So the only reason to have sex is to indulge. Whereas other sensual pleasures, it's more of a necessity that we restrain ourselves. So we don't eat too much, or, we don't indulge in too fancy beds, but we have to sleep. We have to have contact with the bed. But sex is a completely optional contact. So the only reason people have it is for that either the social aspect or for just the pure pleasure, that innate drive to procreate, to have sex. And so we're trying to withdraw in to a meditative, self-contained inner happiness. So if we rely on happiness where we come into the body contact with the body of someone else, we form a relationship and we're kind of deriving pleasure out of each other's bodies, it's the opposite of inner self-restrained happiness, and it's completely optional. So that's also a reason why, it's emphasized a lot that we don't do something that's not needed, that's completely indulging in sensuality. Maybe that's all. Questions?
Yeah, I think we're already getting gratitude for tonight's Dhamma talk from Anal. I don't know if that's like telling us, Bhantes, wrap it up.
We're done. We're exhausted.
All right. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you for the variety of questions, like they were kind of everywhere from beds to celibacy to like animita to renouncing to like, So it was really all over the place. And yeah, I'm just so happy to do this. I think this is like my favorite event, the Monks Chat, because going back to the mission, of Buddhist insights, connecting people with monastics. And I feel this is the best way to do it. And so the schedule, right? This happens every week. And then in the mornings, we had Sutta study earlier today. And there's like so many things going on. I lose track here. And then there's always the weekend programs here. If you're in the area, you can come, also for the weekend meditation programs and the Sunday kind of like takeover. That's what I think about it. Like people take over the temple from the monks on Sundays here. We're just like, oh, I just work here. They kind of run the show. So there's so many things that are going on. Please check the website. Please check Facebook group. Please check our YouTube. What to say? Like, subscribe, and share. Do all the things you can, because that's also sharing the Dharma is the highest dana, right? So when you like and you share and you subscribe, other people get to hear the Dhamma. It increases the algorithm. It pops up in other people's feeds more often, right? So like that's a way for you to practice dana from just like doing this. That's all you got to do. Not much effort, right? High impact, because Dhamma dana is the highest dana. So that's just my whole rant on on social media and sharing and being what did my friend in Mexico says, monk influencers. Be an influencer monk, So like, yeah, do that. So happy to see you all. Any closing words?
No, yeah, just really glad that you guys are coming here to have contact with monastics. It's a really great aspiration. So we're really happy to be able to provide this and have contact with you guys as well. Connecting monastics with people.
Yeah. All right, everyone. So have a good day. Have a good night. Wherever you are in the world, may you be well, happy, comfortable, and peaceful. Sukhi Hotu. See you next time. Bye.